50 patrons, including Bennett and the Mets and Rogers.
When is this to
March
be?
26.
Really? I haven't got an invitation.
Oh, I'll make sure you get one.
I'll come.
Oh, I'd like
How
you
much
to
will
do
it cost?
$100. Webster Journalism Foundation. Good morning. Politics in the paradise of social credit has led for Dr. Patrick McGeer, here now, to a variegated career in power. You may have forgotten, but over the years in the social credit cabinet, he has been in charge of education, universities, science and communication, Treasury Board, ICBC, BC Hydro, BC Petroleum Corporation, BC Research Council, Discovery Foundation, Specific Isotopes, and now he's going to climb aboard the great Silver Birds and be our Minister for International Trade. On the program this morning, we have another item of government-type information. And in the studio is John Shields, the president of the 34,000-member British Columbia Government Employees Union. Talks at the moment have been suspended. And Mr. Shields is canvassing his members as to whether or not to go for a strike ballot. And talks have been suspended partly because of this statement by the Premier on his recent address about wages.
Top priority must be jobs for the unemployed, not just more money for those already working. In the private sector, collective bargaining continues to lead to realism on both sides of the table. In the public sector, the Compensation Stabilization Program is bringing about the same realism. But like any other program, it can be improved. And the Minister of Finance will be announcing some changes in the CSP in the coming days.
But nobody knows yet what the changes are. Might be removing the ability to pay. It might be clamping down tighter on jobs for the unemployed and the status quo for those employed by the government. That's for later. First, after the break, Dr. Patrick McGeer, Minister of International Trade. I demonstrated on the intro, Dr. McGeer, that you're a man of considerable experience and considerable attacks from various quarters. But I was convinced that you were just on the verge of retiring. Had an election been called a week ago, you would have retired. Am I correct?
Oh, I don't think so. If there had been an election a week ago, it would have been extremely important to re-elect the government, because this is our big year with Expo, when we're host to the world. And of course, it's not a time to be changing horses. We're going to have 13 to 16 million visitors at our Expo. It's going to be a big year.
You won't answer the question, but I've got to ask you, was there an election planned and changed because of the various furores and kerfuffles about conflicts of interest, etc., and cabinet ministers' behavior?
No.
No?
No.
No election was planned at all? No. Now, why have you taken international trade? Because you're a man who is strong on high tech and strong on universities and education. This is a most unusual appointment. Do you accept it unwillingly?
Now, this is the year, Jack, when the world comes to British Columbia. I think that most of the people who are visitors will be absolutely flabbergasted at what British Columbians can do. I find traveling the world, there are many myths about our province. People haven't visited British Columbia. Those who come are stunned by the magnificence of the city and the grandeur of the countryside, but they're not that convinced that we're a province which can produce with the best and produce the highest quality goods that can be found anywhere. When they come and they see Expo, these will be leading people from all around the world, leaders of the Soviet Union, leaders of the United States, leaders of the United Kingdom, leaders of Japan. They're going to come and see what British Columbians themselves have done. And it's going to be more stunning for them than even for the people of British Columbia. Now, this is the time when we can move in on them and say, look what British Columbia can do.
You mean you won't have to travel at all? You can be a stay-at-home international trade minister because everybody's going to come to you during Expo?
This is the year when everybody comes to British Columbia, and each individual British Columbia citizen should be there to sell our province this year. This is the year we shift into high gear, and the momentum we develop in 1986, we hope, will carry us industrially to the turn of the century and beyond. So this is the big year for us.
How are you going to convince these people that this is a stable province and not merely a polarized one that goes from right wing to left wing from time to time, which is gripped with major labor crises? I've got one talking about this morning. We have all our major industries coming up. Construction trades may well close down on the 1st of May. And I'm not spreading gloom, I'm telling you facts. How are you going to convince them that this is a place in which they can spend money and create goods at less than the best union rates?
Jack, by the same method that the people who come to Expo themselves will be convinced. They will see the difference between the myth created by the media and the reality of what's actually happening.
Dr. McGeer, don't tell me that in anything I said just now I'm creating a myth of the media.
Yes, I am. I'm saying that the reality of Expo, you see, there's going to be an awful lot of places that have red faces. The Vancouver Sun, BCTV, CBC, because there will be Expo. All of the knocking that went on, all of the complaints that were broadcast abroad, that it was losing money, that everything was wrong with Expo. That's the image that is created abroad by British Columbia. If you're a government official or if you're somebody trying to get business, you're fighting all the time the myth abroad that our polarized media has created. Now people are going to come to British Columbia, just as the citizens will come to Expo. They're going to see the reality and they'll realize the bunkum that goes out of BCTV, the bunkum that goes out of the CBC, the bunkum that goes out of the Vancouver Sun. And when they see that reality and they know what British Columbians can really do, that's when everything will change.
I have never heard such bunkum from a politician, with all due respect, sitting in my studio. You telling me, let me recap so you can't accuse me of inaccuracy or sensationalism. You're telling me that because of criticisms by the Vancouver Sun and stories by BCTV, etc., this is what has given British Columbia a bad image around the world? Surely not, Doctor.
Yes, that's a very large part of it. We fight that myth all the time when we go abroad.
Let me give you the...
We fight that myth all the time.
Labor troubles, yes, that has spread our name far and wide and blackened it. The media didn't cause the labor troubles. The media doesn't do half the reporting on labor troubles, in my opinion, that it should. Look at the construction trade right now. Look at the pulp business, the pulp strikes, where we lost our pulp markets last year. Look at the drop in lumber trade. Look at the 31 million hours we've lost in industrial production in the forest industry. Look at the lack of decision by your government, said Webster, in creating a total lack of confidence in the development of the forest lands by not dealing with the Indian land claims, especially with TFL 24. Am I correct in these facts? I am.
Yes.
And you're trying to say that we in the media are full of bunkum because there have been critical stories of Expo.
The union problem and the image it created abroad used to be our #1 problem. Now it's #2. The media is #1.
I don't accept that at all in any way, shape, or form. The media is #1 because there have been critical stories.
But the problem is that your problem is that you aren't traveling abroad trying to sell British Columbia. I am. We have to deal with things that are wildly discrepant from the actuality. And the great thing about Expo is people are going to come to British Columbia and actually see it. They'll know what the workers of British Columbia can produce. There it will be in front of them. They'll see the performance of the people who are here and something that is better run than they've ever seen before. That's how good British Columbia really is.
Are we responsible? Are we responsible for the government of British Columbia sitting on its thumbs on Indian land claims, acting indecisively on investment in the forest industry? Are we responsible for the lack of cooperation with Cominco, which lost 300 jobs up there? Are we responsible for the fact that occasionally your government will break a promise and we will spotlight it, like the Sky Train to 104th Avenue?
If there wasn't a problem, Jack, the media would invent it, and if there is a problem, they blow it way out of proportion. When do you ever see people in the Vancouver Sun or BCTV or CBC anywhere trying to talk about the good things in British Columbia? People have to come here and find out for themselves, and they're going to.
I think far be it from me to diagnose a brain researcher, but I think you're a trifle paranoid on the subject.
I'm not paranoid at all. I'm just telling you why British Columbia is going to be different this year than any year before, because people are going to come and find out for themselves. And they're going to come in millions, far more than the media ever thought.
Nobody has knocked the fact that millions may come, that you've sold 9.6 million visits and all the rest of it. We have criticized what we thought was kind of unusual way of handling public funds and reporting public monies. Did you want us to censor the fact that Jimmy Patterson and Mr. Bennett say there's going to be a $300 million plus deficit? We've also reported the fact that the revenues obtained from the visitors will in some tax way bring back that deficit into circulation. I think you're being really sensitive and out of it altogether.
No, I'm not being sensitive at all. You're the one that's being sensitive.
Are we
all
responsible
I
for
said was that people were going to arrive and realize that they had been fed a bunch of bunkum by the press. And I still think that's going to happen.
Oh, Dr. McGeer, are we responsible for the conflict of interest furors, for Waterland resigning his portfolio? Are we responsible for all the news stories that happen?
No, you're not responsible for all the news stories. All you do is pump the volume up and create a distorted impression. And that's what's going to be the reality versus the myth this summer. People are going to see the reality.
Let you tell Dr. McGeer what he says, that the problems of British Columbia are entirely due to the incredible power of the twisted stories coming from here and elsewhere, damning British Columbia around the world. The media, the messenger is to blame. Shoot them, hang them. After the break. My non-partisan qualifications are now perfect. Skelly, the NDP leader, screamed hogwash at me 4 times. Dr. McGeer, Minister of International Trade, screams bunkum at me. A couple of questions, though.
Maybe the only thing the government and the NDP agree on.
Oh, yes. I hadn't thought of that one, said he. Are you planning a separate university institute? It's not in your portfolio, but you are a power behind many thrones. You built that hospital out at UBC against great downtown opposition. Are you planning a separate high-tech university of some kind, to the horror of UBC and SFU?
We have released a discussion paper only on building an institute here that would emphasize applied mathematics, that would emphasize computer science, robotics, and microelectronics. Now, the reason for that, Jack, is that in the high technology field, these are the 4 disciplines that form the cutting edge. The big difficulty that a young person today has is that they're unable to get exposed at any institution in North America, all 4 of these disciplines at the same time. So the great firms around the world, they collect one group from this discipline, one from another. They meld them into an industrial organization. But in Japan, it's different, because there they get them all together. And people wonder, why is Japan rolling over the world in the high-tech field?
I can see, even I, idiot though I am in this idiot profession of mine, can see the concept of that. The question is a simple one. Are you planning to put them all together in one institute and call them a university?
Not a university, no.
An institute. It's going to be a separate institute with new buildings.
That's what we hope.
And money for that.
Well, the money we hope will come from industrial development that will go with it. Let me tell you something, Jack. Since the war, Japan has increased its output of engineers 400-fold. Same number of lawyers. Now, we've
introduced our lawyers 400-fold.
Not 400-fold, but we have expanded our lawyers, and we've kept our engineers constant. Now, what I'm trying to do is to reverse that. I think that we need more engineers, because engineers build things, and what lawyers do
is they issue libel writs.
Well, only to people like yourself. But the problem, of course, is that that we've got to make the pie larger. We can't argue continuously over how to devise the
I'm sorry I asked you that question, because I want people to speak to Bunkum Webster from what I used to call you, Dr. McPiffle. You remember that?
Yeah. Now, our objective, Jack, let's keep it clear here, is to make the pie larger, not to argue how we divide it.
But it's
make
to
it larger, then there's more for everybody.
And to redirect people into the proper industries for the future.
Yeah. Everything is designed to make the pie grow larger. That's what we require.
Go ahead, please. And please make your comments either side sharp, succinct, and brief. Go ahead, please.
Jack, I have 2 questions for Dr. McGeer, both about money. One, on a previous broadcast, with Dr. McGeer, you interviewed him about the federal transfer of payments in the Secretary of State's report. My question is, does Dr. McGeer, now these changed portfolios, still refuse to accept the figures in the State report that showed that BC got more money from Ottawa than they spent for universities? My second question deals with Expo reporting of finances under the Public Bodies Information Act. And does he, Dr. McGeer, feel that Expo should obey the law and report in the same format as they do when Dr. McGeer was on faculty at UBC?
Good questions. One about the
Okay,
Secretary
let's deal with the second one first. Of course, there should be absolute full disclosure of every cent spent at Expo, and there will. To get back to the first question, I take back nothing about what I said on the federal government transfer payments, because I was there, Charlie. I was there when Mitchell Sharp and Mike Pearson introduced that program, when they said they would genuinely pay for half the post-secondary education costs. I was there when the Trudeau government put a cap on the spending. I was there when British Columbia was being shafted because they would not pay half our post-secondary education bills. And the people who got a reasonable share, never half, but a reasonable share for British Columbia, and I'll always give them credit, Ron Basford, who was then the senior minister, and John Roberts, who was Secretary of State. But if I may use this word, Ottawa was screwing British Columbia, nowhere near half the post-secondary payments. Then when 1977 came along, the last thing the federal government wanted to have done was to be saddled with half the cost of post-secondary education. So they said to the provinces, here's so many tax points, here's so much cash, you take it for education and health and be done with it. Then as soon as that happened, they said, oh, well, we're giving it all for post-secondary education. You never hear a peep out of them about health, which has got soaring costs, and where the federal government, if you use their calculations for post-secondary education, is paying less than 30%. Now, the agreement for both education and for health, when these national programs were started, by the federal government going into areas of provincial jurisdiction, was they would pay half. Now, nowhere near half. Nowhere near half, and they're talking about reducing the transfer payments. I tell you, for a group of people that talk out of both sides of their mouths, I'll take federal officials anytime over any province in Canada. Disgraceful, the whole thing, absolutely disgraceful. Propaganda of the worst kind. And I was there during this whole period.
From the Libs and the Tories.
Yes.
Go ahead.
But it's all propagated, I'll tell you, by civil servants in Ottawa, who are the worst manipulators of all.
Go ahead, please.
Jack.
Yes.
Jack, here it comes.
Yeah.
They've been getting themselves reelected by picking scapegoats for the last 20 years. They said it's our teachers who are at fault, it's our nurses who are responsible, our doctors did it. Well, now I guess what they're going to have to say is it's all the media's fault, and they're going to try and scapegoat the media. It's a pretty clever trick. All they have to do is say that you people were lying about this and lying about that, and then they don't have to tell you why they don't have
they're preaching to the converted,
why they don't have any sense, why they don't have any plans. All they can say is, oh, we do, and the media's just lying to you. So wait for it. That's what they'll get reelected on.
Thank you, sir.
Well, at least he got it right. Everybody's against us but the people. Anytime they don't want me in office or any Premier Bill Bennett in office, they'll just vote against them, Jack.
Go ahead, please.
Hello. Dr. McGeer, I grew up in Richmond years ago, and I seem to remember a Liberal minister, or pardon me, candidate for government, who waxed very eloquently out there for the Liberal government, Trudeau. And now I hear a different story. Seems to me that somebody's talking out the other side of their mouth now.
You're talking about Dr. McGeer?
Is he talking about me?
Yeah, but you changed it. You being a turncoat.
Certainly. I worked to support those Liberals and to get them into power, but not once I saw what they did. Started us on the course of overspending. Here we're running up debts of $35 billion a year. Our dollar has slumped to less than 70 cents, now recovering a little bit. These are problems of mismanagement of government. And when our government tries to bring expenditure under control, We're swimming against the whole tide in Canada. We're the only government in all of Canada that believes running up debts is a bad thing.
Since you came in...
you're criticizing, and he's saying I should be supporting the kinds of policies that build up a $35 billion a year debt in Canada.
I want to tell you, from
not.
1975 to 1983, you had lots of opportunity to be lean and trim, and you sat just guzzling yourselves on the fat revenues of those days, so that when you came to restraint, you had to slap down the hatchet and ruin confidence in people's minds in British Columbia.
Did you say we were wrong then and we were right now? No, sir. Who fought restraint hardest? Why, right here on BCTV and CBC. If you believed all those things, why didn't you support us for restraint and say that that was the correct thing to do and you were profligate in all those years? No, we had to trim our spending, of course.
You were slow
because
in
the money
doing it.
wasn't...
You were profligate in all those years, and you know it.
Of course we were profligate, but less so than any other government in Canada. And when we said profligacy couldn't continue, who was the most strongest critic of us? The media.
No!
Yes.
There's very little editorial comment on the media at all. Let's get that quite clear.
Filled with pages and pages of headlines about how cruel a government is, how we can't
These
do
were
this sort of
stories
thing.
which had to be reported. Human
the
suffering is a legitimate story.
Sure. And so what should have been done, and what should the media have supported the government to do in a time of restraint? Everybody take less because there's less to go around. Then you don't have unemployment. But instead, no, sir, we have to keep giving raises and raises and raises and pitch more people out of work. It's silly.
Every time you look at a news story on BCTV, you think it's twisted against you, don't you?
No.
Not every time.
Not every time.
99% of the time.
That's high.
I think you've got a problem. After the break.
Good morning. A couple of the stories we're working on today for the noon news hour. Johnson & Johnson bailing out of Tylenol capsules, in effect surrendering to a terrorist who kept putting cyanide in. Instead, they are pushing caplets. We'll have a look at what's available instead of Tylenol, as well as in addition to the capsule form that's now being abandoned. Would you believe stripping is a route to stardom? It has worked for one woman who is now 21 years old, who's had a part in Beverly Hills Cop and is featured in a documentary on stripping. Join us today at noon.
Well, you certainly haven't lost the gift of the gab, have you?
Just the facts.
Sometimes
it hurts.
Most of them are bunkum. If you can say bunkum, I can say bunkum. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I just have one question for Mr. McGeer, and you know, try to like a straight answer. What I'm wondering is, if we didn't have the press reporting on what's happening in government, with this government not seeming to want to sit in legislature, and then when they do go to legislation, they use closure against official opposition, and then when they come out of legislature, they sue them when they criticize them. How do we, sir, find out what you're going to do in this province? Nobody seems to know but you, so why don't you tell us what you're going to do to us?
Well, what we should be telling you is what we're doing for you, because the media isn't going to tell you that. I agree with you. You're absolutely correct. We need a strong media in British Columbia, and
you're backing down now.
Oh no, I'm not backing down.
You
I'm
are
not going to
backing
withdraw.
I'm
You're backing down.
I'm not
I think
backing
you should
down.
apologize now.
What
No.
are you gonna
All
do
I'm
to
saying
us
is
in the
that we need a strong media, and we've certainly got that in British Columbia. You do a lot of damage abroad, but we support your right to do that.
All right, let me test you. When did the House last sit?
The House last sat in November, I think it was.
All right, you run out of money without a budget on April the 1st this year, don't you?
We will have a budget sometime around the 1st of April, I would think.
I see. We won't have an election, you assure me, but it's going to be a hurried legislature, restricted before Expo, correct? We used to have a government...
I think it'll be a normal legislative session.
It'll be a 4 or 5 week session of the legislature, won't it?
4 or 5 months, I think, would be more like it.
It's not going to sit during Expo, is it?
I would think so.
You're telling me the legislature will sit during Expo?
That would be my guess.
Because
You know, I can't tell you how long the legislature will sit, because that's an opposition prerogative.
Yeah, but
it's not a government
The
prerogative.
point I'm making is that with... Oh, nonsense, sir.
Sure. The government says when it starts, and the opposition says when it finishes.
Well,
because
all
they're
you
the
do,
ones that talk.
you just go back to days of W.A.C. Bennett, run 24 hours round the clock, tire everybody, get it done, and they all quit and go home. Now, The fact is that the legislature is the debating forum for British Columbia. We see damn little of the legislature in this province. Should be sitting twice a year, shouldn't it?
Well, it did sit twice last year.
Doesn't seem like it. It's so inconsequential, nobody notices it.
That's not our fault. You say it's so important for people to sit and draw attention to all the things that are going on in British Columbia. The legislature sits and you can't even remember.
Go ahead, please.
Dr. McGeer,
Yes, yes.
I haven't heard a single respectable remark come out of your mouth this morning. Now, before I get to the question, I've never ever seen such incompetent people in government in high-ranking positions in all my life. Now, would you like to tell everybody that's listening a single resource that the BC government has been involved in that has succeeded significantly?
Good question.
Just one single resource.
Just one. You can't say Northeast Coal.
Well, government shouldn't be in resources. That's why we created BRIC and got rid of all of the accumulation that came to
I'm
government.
glad you mentioned BRIC.
Well, I only
Less than
say...
$2.
Sure.
A disastrous.
Absolutely disastrous. I quite agree.
You were the guy that made the deal with Kaiser. You were the guys that killed the Southeast coal market.
Wait a second. That's private sector. I'm not sure government would have done as well, but this gentleman wants governments to run resources.
No,
and I
no,
say
definitely
I
not.
say, well, but you say, what has the government done? The government has put the private sector with the private sector, not with government. And that's the difficulty that many governments around the world have, and public that elects them, saying governments can run business better than business. Our government says, no, business should run business, not government. What we try and do is to help business as much as we can do business around the world. That's my job. But run business, never. And that's where this viewer is wrong. He seems to think that it's government's job to do business.
But listen, Dr. McGeer, we in the Feds, the people of BC and the Feds, have put something like $1.4 billion into the infrastructure for Northeast Coal, right? Quintetson has had terrible trouble. Tech is surviving. The whole Northeast Coal has given some jobs, but it destroyed the old Southeast coal market, damaged it severely, didn't it?
No. Jack, here you've got something like 8 billion tons of coal up in the northeastern part of British Columbia. You've built a town, you've put services in the town, you've built a railroad, you've put the infrastructure that will make it possible to get coal out of there for hundreds of years. And you're telling me that's wrong.
It is wrong because you got it in the wrong place.
You see, what can you do with a caller like that who's against developing the resources of British Columbia?
I can cut him
You
off
can't do
for you.
anything.
Go ahead from Nelson.
Okay, I agree with you, Pat. You're absolutely right about the media. Just one point to make it quickly. The press reported on the 4 MLAs who quit from the opposition. They didn't mention once the kind of pension they were going to get. Turns around that 3 of your people are going to quit, and the pensions are splashed all over the newspaper. That's just one thing. Another thing is the close-ups that they took of the Premier all the time. They put the camera angles right up to his face for over 2 years until somebody complained vociferously enough to stop it. Aside from all that, the Indians on Lyle Island. Just to give you an idea, they never mentioned for once in the media that the Indians have 850,000 acres of land in B.C., that some of them are the richest people in B.C., the Capilano Indians, for instance, the ones in Fort St. John, for instance. There was none of that mentioned at all, and with the help of the media, they built up that trouble on Lyle Island. I agree with you 100%, Pat, and you're doing a good job.
Hold on, please. A couple of points here you've got to take, in which I do not plead guilty in any way, shape, or form. I think it's perfectly proper that the $58,000 pension that go to some of the older members retiring should be publicized. You wrote your own pensions and you get them indexed forever and a day, don't you? I'm not complaining, but it's a fact of public record.
Jack, no government in power can decide what a future government will do. You know that. And therefore, nothing in government is forever. No policy can last beyond the day in which the people who set those policies are out of office.
All right.
And if pensions are wrong, some future government is going to correct that.
You're going to pension about $60,000 a year when you quit, weren't you?
Nowhere near it, but that's what Marjorie Nichols says.
Did you work
and
it
again,
out?
again, that's bunkum.
All right, give me the pension figure.
I didn't work it out,
You know it.
but I got something from the government that was about 46,000.
46,000
if
a
I
year.
were to leave, yes.
Now, I was...
But you see, that's what Marjorie Nichol would write.
46,000.
Well,
Marjorie
I
Nichols,
think that's
I mean,
correct.
you
Look,
really
Jack,
must hate...
I'm not that interested in. I can get you a precise figure, but I will say that again, it's more media bunkum.
No media bunkum to print pensions.
No, to print correct pensions, it's not media bunkum. To print incorrect pensions, it is.
Now, as far as Lyle Island is concerned, I was the guy who started the whole kerfuffle on Lyle Island, and I make no apologies for it. And the weakness and indecision of your government is unbelievable. There's God knows how many, $600–700 million involved in the development of these TFLs and the three big companies in Western Pulp and the rest of it. And what do? You can't make up your mind to do anything. You issue a few permits, then you lift them again because of some fear of an Eastern media mafia and the Canadian Wilderness Foundation. Would you concede to me that your government's handling of Lyle Island has been indecisive and weak and affects the confidence in the lumber industry in British Columbia?
Well, certainly it affects the confidence in the lumber industry, but you know, Jack, in addition to the social responsibility that one has towards the Indian people,
of course,
which is a major one, Indian affairs are a federal responsibility, and we're directly dealing with a federal responsibility here. And it may seem like the British Columbia government is weak and waffling on this issue, but we don't control the destiny of the Indians. This is something which is a federal responsibility and a constitutional one. And until one deals with the constitutional and the federal issues here, you can't get the provincial ones sorted out correctly. It's all very well to say it's Victoria's fault and dump it all on Victoria's lap, but there are important national issues here that are not being dealt with by the national government. That's the difficulty.
Look, if you want my sum up on it, this guy McMillan, the Minister of Tourism and Forestry, he doesn't know what he's talking about when he talks about Lyle Island and says he'll buy it from you of the South Mosby for $20 million. But you're the people who can tell the feds they're behaving like idiots.
But that's fine for the Minister of the Environment federally to come out and make some headlines in British Columbia, which you're quite pleased to put forward to the public.
He doesn't forward because he
doesn't control it either because it's the Department of Indian Affairs. He can't take the land away from the Indians.
I know the constitutional argument. I think you're appearing weak, though, on your responses.
It's not a question of appearing weak. We don't control our destiny in this thing. The federal government has got to decide how to deal with the Indian issue. Then we can handle the rest of it.
One further short segment. I must get to John Shieldswood with Dr. McGeer after break. Dr. McGeer and Buncombe Webster will continue the interview. Go ahead from Kelowna.
Hello. Yes, I've been waiting a long time, but I'd like to say I'm 100% behind Dr. Pat. And as of many that are here, too, say the same thing. Jack, there's a lot of things you know very well that are printed and broadcast through the media that are distorted. And you should try to calm yourself a little bit. I'm worried for you.
Let's have some more calls, Jack.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
After listening to Mr. McGeer and his childlike innocence blaming the ills of BC on the media, I would suggest that he be made Minister of Daycares and Preschool because he's obviously in the throes of his second childhood.
Thank you. And I'm going
one for you and one for me.
I'm going to nominate Dr. Suzuki's Invisible Bears on Lyle Island to be his executive assistant. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
That's you.
I have a question for Dr. McGeer, and that is that if the government is so worried about money, why is it, or is it true that we're losing approximately $30 million a year in medical payments from the federal government because of the BC government's allowing extra billing by the doctors in BC? Now, the second thing is for Jack Webster. Jack, you have a great show. Unfortunately, I'm one of the many who has to work most of the time. I would like to know why you don't come on at 7 o'clock at night so that the taxpayers who have to put up with this government can see you, and not just all the unemployed and the friendly people in Kelowna. Thank you.
Stay tuned. $30 million were used because of extra billing by doctors in BC?
No, it's not extra billing. What he's referring to is the penalty British Columbia pays for co-insurance charges for hospitalization. Co-insurance charges came in the 1950s when we first started the hospital program, and suddenly the federal government, after 25 years, or a little longer than that, decides that they're going to deduct the money. It's just a device by the federal government to give less money to British Columbia.
But if you make up your mind by the end of next year or something and drop all the charges, you get that money back again, don't you?
I've forgotten the exact details.
My memory is better than yours.
But the point about it is that something which was standard practice in British Columbia for 25 years, and a responsible practice, I might add, is now denied by the federal government.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a comment for Dr. McGeer, and that is that the handmaiden to King Billy Bunkum should not spew feces on the set.
Oh, come now, sir. That's nicely put, but it's a little too... Try again.
We've listened to their propaganda for so long that I suggest that maybe he checks himself into the Crease Clinic before they close down Riverview. Good.
That's yours.
We got a few strong views out there this morning, Jack.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Good morning.
I was educated in this province while this province still had money for education and universities, and I've worked in the forest industry. I've seen people come and go. And Dr. McGeer, it seems to me this bunk business, the paper isn't spewing any more bunk than those little pamphlets that the social credit government has been putting in the mail, which I have to pay through my tax dollars and don't really appreciate. I can always go out and buy the newspaper or not buy the newspaper if I choose to, but the little government pamphlets come regardless of whether I want them or not.
Sir, you're a partner in progress, you fool. You're a partner in progress. You must watch and absorb all these political commercials paid for by the taxpayer.
Yeah, but of course one of the things that he forgets about the newspaper is whether he buys it or not, he's paying for all the advertising that goes in the newspaper, which goes on the bills that he has to pay at the supermarket. So it's not.
Buy it or not,
no,
government pamphlets.
well, you don't have quite as much choice as you think.
They pay for themselves.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Let's go. Webster.
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment. I feel that, number one, the newspapers are doing a damn good job at explaining the situation in B.C., and at times they do exaggerate. But I sure don't agree with what your guest is saying. Number one, if we want to get more tourists, like for Expo, to come into this province, it sure isn't a very good incentive when we're having our gas prices so high. I believe we have to pay taxes, no question, but we should have the taxes in other areas rather than gas to try and create more tourists to come into our province.
True enough, and it's your government which adds its automatic cost of living factor, inflation factor to the gas prices, correct?
Gas prices are too high. I've got an answer for this caller. Switch to natural gas, because instead of 56.2, which it is just outside, your cost is 22 cents a gallon, no taxes at all, provincial, on that natural gas, and much better for your engine.
No, it's not. Yeah, that's better for my engine.
That's British Columbia fuel, natural gas. Oil is Arab fuel. We get some from Alberta, but we're going to continue to import oil from abroad. We continue to be dependent upon OPEC, but we've got 9,000 natural gas wells, roughly, capped in Canada, including a huge number in British Columbia, and this is why we keep the price of natural gas so low, so people don't have to pay these high fuel prices, and so we'll have genuine energy security. Go get your car converted to natural gas.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
How are you this morning?
Excellent.
I think that you're fantastic. Your program is absolutely fantastic. And Mr. McGeer, the Honorable Mr. McGeer, has not changed since he played basketball for the Vancouver Cloverleaf. And I think that you're absolutely fantastic, and I just wish that you would come up at night where we can watch you and the taxpayers can watch you.
You mean me or McGeer?
I just think that Premier Bennett has got to go. The whole shebang has got to go.
You got to go.
She wasn't a Cloverleaf fan either, Jack.
Go ahead, please, from Victoria.
Yes, Jack and Dr. McGeer. Certainly, I believe that Dr. McGeer is correct in his comments about the media, and I'm certain that your reaction there's no question about it. Your reaction, you're proving yourself guilty just by your reaction there today. I'm quite surprised, really, and I support McGeer all the way on his comments.
Thank you very much. Salmon Arm.
Jack, I'd like to, after hearing all these confrontations for the last 3 or 4 years, I think during this Expo time, I think it's about time that you yourself and the government of BC and all the people of British Columbia should get together and, for goodness sake, get away from this confrontation and try to help each other and try to help the province of British Columbia for a change.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's one that...
Not a bad
right,
thought.
Yeah, right on.
My thanks to Dr. McGeer for his presence here this morning, and as a bunkum artist, I am delighted to turn to a different guest, and we shall be talking, whether Dr. McGeer likes it or not, about grave difficulties between 34,000 civil servants and the government of which he is such a prominent and active member, and now the International Trade Minister for British Columbia. Thank you, Patrick. I shall be back with John Shields after the break. A little background for my next guest, who is not all that well known to the broad public in British Columbia, but soon will be, if not already. John Shields, the president of the BC Government Employees Union. He was elected in 1985 in June, and a moderate to deal moderately with Victoria was the message we kind of got. And the BCGEU decided to negotiate on a less confrontational basis. And when they met with Plecas and Victoria, the DEP provincial sec, they had a strategy called getting to yes. And the interesting thing is that this getting to yes was a theory developed by Gordon Fisher, the man who actually was credited with bringing Sadat and Begin together for the Camp David Accord. And Fisher was brought to British Columbia to meet with both sides. You felt you were dealing with involuntary guidelines, and then something went wrong. Was the first thing that went wrong was what Curtis said?
Well, that was the beginning of the tip of the situation, Jack. We, as you had indicated in the beginning, what we were approached fairly early in the summer to say, as McGeer said earlier, that one of the most serious problems facing the province was the industrial relations perception. And senior Ministry of Labour officials and people from the BC Business Council approached me and said, can you change the circumstances? Can you make it look, can you make industrial relations different? I said I would be willing to give it a try. We proceeded to negotiate through October, November, December, and then in January, we had a change. And it was Curtis, it was what we saw at the table.
Curtis went on television to announce there'd be no increase for public sector workers, right?
Right.
And then in February 5, the Premier says that the CSP will be changed. Do you know what the change is yet? He had promised an announcement on the Compensation Stabilization Program, which includes at the moment lack of ability to pay kills all increases, right?
Right.
When are you going to get the ground rules for CSP?
Well, I wrote to the Premier requesting a meeting. When I didn't hear from him within a few days, I went to his office and they directed me to Mr. Curtis. I went to Mr. Curtis, contacted his office. I have been waiting for a meeting with him now for almost 2 weeks, and I still have not yet had.
Because I remember when you started negotiations, the score was that there would be no public statements at all. Have you withdrawn from this blackout agreement?
We did yesterday. I'm in the process of going to tour the province to tell my membership the situation. We're in a situation where now I think the issues at the table are fairly critical. I want to consult with the membership. I want to explain to the public that the chance that we took, the gamble on trying to change the industrial relations climate basically has been thrown away by this government, and I think people ought to know that.
Now, negotiations are presently suspended.
Yes.
Have you been officially told what's on the table for you, if anything at all, in a 3-year contract?
Yes, we have. In January, after months of discussion, the government tabled its written proposals. What they have proposed is a series of measures that will take about 2,000 jobs currently who are workers and turn them into managers. They have made a major attack on sick leave benefits, cutting some of the benefits in half. The proposing to give government the right to be able to terminate injured workers and remove benefits in the death benefits from widows and orphans. They have a major increase in the hours of work that will change the hour structure or work structure for every government worker. And they've put on the table 0 in this year with no increments paid, 0 in 1987-88, and 2% in 88-89.
And that's all?
That's it.
So that 2% would be covered by the present compensation stabilization package, wouldn't it?
There's more actually in the compensation package than is there, because we've put on the table, we've identified savings to the government, which we estimate we can save in excess of $50 million through programs that we can negotiate and initiate with the government that would cost the taxpayers absolutely nothing for an increase for government workers. So that was part of our Getting to Yes program. We actually tabled a proposal that would save them that much money.
Would save without losing jobs?
Without losing jobs.
50 million increase in productivity,
yes,
you're saying?
Yes.
And that would cover the cost of this, would it?
It would more than cover the cost of what we have on the table as a wage proposal.
All right, let me get it quite clear now, so tell me if I'm wrong. They have a program whereby they'll take about 2,000 workers and remove them from the union and make them managers.
That's right.
Cutting sick leave. The first 2 days of sick leave in future would be unpaid, I believe.
And the next 3 days at 3/4 pay instead of full pay, so it cuts it in half.
In certain circumstances, terminate injured workers.
Yes.
Cut back in death benefits.
Yes.
And 0, 0, and 2% in a 3-year contract.
Right.
And you're asking for how much?
We're asking 2.5% in 1985 and 3.5% in 1986, 87. Basically, we're asking to maintain the cost of living.
And you've got some other propositions too. Are any of them key?
Well, I think there's better provisions to take care of layoffs for senior workers. We need to do
layoff notices. Get 60 days
yes.
instead of 20.
And we're primarily interested in doing something in the area of protecting public rights through this whole notion of public disclosure or whistleblowing, because we see that as being one of the keys to being able to make some of these productivity savings, because people have who see the over expenditures and over payments and a lot of the things that go wrong that Dr. McGeer wouldn't want you to see, government workers see. So we have a proposal to enable workers.
To protect government employees who want to speak out when they have solid evidence of government wrongdoing.
Yes.
Well, I thought that was a good proposal, except that I thought that you should have held back a little bit. I don't think you can go to the press first time round.
No,
I think you should be able to go somewhere within government, and if you get no action on a good, solid case, then go public.
Yes, that's actually what we're proposing in the negotiations, is to have an agency that people can go to make things public.
Well, despite what Dr. McGeer would like me not to say, things are bad in British Columbia just now, even though unemployment is down to about 12.9%. We have pockets, as you know, of 20 or even 30%.
Yes.
And Premier Bennett's attack said simply, our function is jobs for the unemployed and no more pay for those working.
Yes.
That's what you're trying to fight against.
Yeah, well, actually, what we're saying is that their proposal on hours of work is going to cost about 1,200 jobs. They're going to, that proposal alone will result in layoffs or firings of about 1,200 people. What we are also saying is that we can save the taxpayers enough money to put that money back into real spending in the form of wages throughout every community in this province.
I want to hear from callers now, although I have a couple more questions for John Shields. I want to hear from callers on this key labour negotiation after the break. Well, you had big meetings in Victoria last night, didn't it? Was it
Yes.
Victoria?
Victoria, we started.
Where are you meeting today? Despite Dr. McGeer's fear of the media, if you have a meeting today, tell me about it.
Yeah, we're meeting tonight at 7 o'clock at the Italian Cultural Center for all members and their families.
That's in this particular area?
In the Vancouver area, and we'll be in Prince George, in Nelson, Kamloops the rest of the week.
But you sound kind of nice Nelly on the strike vote. Are you in a position to take a strike vote?
Well, we've had our members being canvassed by their officers for several months, and the officers tell us that people are really angry with the government. But I was elected on a campaign promise that I would consult with the members before making major decisions, and so we're touring the province now to do just that.
You haven't distributed strike ballots yet?
No, we haven't.
Now, the next question, which would make you look absolutely awful. You couldn't conceivably be on strike during Expo.
It is possible that we could be on strike during Expo. I've taken the position that we are not going to strike Expo. We're not going to picket Expo. We're not going to interfere with Expo, because our argument is not with the people of the province who want to go see Expo, but we do have a problem with the government that they're taking a position. And if we are on strike, we won't be. I mean, if we take a strike vote, it's not my intention to go galloping to a strike. I want to get a negotiated collective agreement, but I won't foreclose any options of the possibility of striking against the government during the summer.
Mm-hmm. We'll go on the phones. Go ahead to John Shields, President of the BCGEU.
Yes, Mr. Shields. I work at Lakeside Correctional.
Yes.
Yeah, and I hear, well, I'm going to the meeting tonight, and they wanted us to work 12-hour shifts for 4 days, and then 4 off. I got my strike card that was sent to me. Will we actually be going on strike? Do you think that there's a possibility?
Well, I'd have to say there's a possibility. At this stage, it looks as though with the government proposals on the table, and there looks as though they're trying to force us into a confrontation. But I hope that with a mandate from the membership, if that's what the people are saying across the province, that we can back the government off from their position and get back to serious negotiations.
They have broken off negotiations completely?
No, we have suspended negotiations because they had made announcements that they would change the ground rules that we negotiate by under this wage control legislation called the CSP. We've got to know what those changes are before we can sit confidently at the table and negotiate with them.
And Mr. Bennett is not willing to cough up what he was going to tell you weeks ago.
That's what he's told the people who are coming in within days. We have not yet had an opportunity to find out.
Well, you may be chasing a will-o'-the-wisp, because his announcement was, to say accurately, ambiguous, was it not? He didn't indicate which way he was going to go.
Yes.
So, really, that's why you've suspended negotiations.
Yeah, as I said yesterday to Mr. Plekas, we may be dealing with a dark room in which there's a pussycat or there's an alligator. I don't know which is in there, and we turn on the lights and find out.
One question to this woman. You said four days at 12 hours.
Yes.
You get overtime for 4 of them, would you?
No.
Oh, I would not.
No, she doesn't.
No, I don't get any extra pay. They would ask me to work 12-hour shifts in the prison, and then I would have 4 off, but no extra pay, no nothing.
I thought 44 hours was the maximum.
In government work, Jack, several years ago, in order to get to the 35-hour week average, 7-hour day average, we had agreed to some longer shifts in exchange for time off, but not at overtime rates.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I get very disturbed, Mr. Webster, when I listen to government negotiators trying to get more and more money from the taxpayers. Their contract, what I was listening to, is far and above what in the private sector many of us get. Like just sick pay and all these reduction of 3/4 for sick pay, the 3rd day and so forth. That's what we're only getting in our private company. We don't get what they get. And it just makes me angry. Just listen to what the post office's employees want. They don't want anyone to show up for work. And
they have a bad absentee problem in the Vancouver Post Office.
So many government agencies. I'm just fed up because we're paying taxes too. We can't get this. We are negotiating again with our company. We expect to get a reduction in our wages. If not that, at least stand pat. And we do not have the fringe benefits that these people get. And it's just, I don't know why they think they can go to the taxpayer and suck us dry more and more.
Well, the caller is expressing a point of view, Jack, but what they don't know is that those benefits were already bought and paid for in previous negotiations.
Yes, but it's about time. You guys have been far too high all these years.
Well, let me tell you the truth is that if we had only kept pace with the rate of inflation since 1979, the wages would be 15% higher than they are right now. We have been falling behind year after year. The percentage of wages as part of the public expenditure has fallen behind from 17% in 1975 down to 12% in 1985.
But he has an antipathetic point with which many people with not such good conditions would agree.
Well, if the media would only tell the truth, we would all have the story out there, right?
Jack?
Okay, yes, go on.
Yeah, one more point. Just think of these woodworkers that bought their
Plant.
I bought these wood plants here in Victoria and New Westminster, and they had to take a 25% reduction in their wages.
Okay, bye. Gotta go. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster.
Yes.
If the BCGEU decides to go on strike, cross the picket line because I need a raise.
You cross their picket line?
Well, of course, I need a raise.
Are you a member of the BCGEU?
No, sir. Member of no union.
Oh, I see. You'd go and work.
Well, of course, I need a raise.
What are you doing now?
I'm working, but not at enough money.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead from Burns Lake.
Yeah, Mr. Shields, you go out there and you go get them because right at the present, I just got my T4 the other day. We are living at the national poverty line for a family of 5 right now. If the government gets away with what they want to do, we'll be below the poverty line. I think there should be a little more emphasis to let the public know exactly how much we don't earn. They all think we're making great money. And they talk about this guy, they took a 25% increase on those mills on the island. Well, that doesn't make any big deal because with their 25% cutback, they're still making more than we make.
Okay, boy. What do you do for the government?
I work for Department of Highways.
I thought you were pretty well paid.
Jack, that's
yeah, well,
not
like I
the
say,
case.
I got my T4 the other day. It's $21,000 for the year.
It's not
The
big
national
money.
poverty line for a family of 4 is $20,000, and I have a family of 5.
Thank you, sir. More with John Shields, President GEU, after the break. You must admit it's a very clever ploy of Premier Bennett to say jobs for the unemployed, no more money for those working.
Well,
it strikes at every unemployed person in BC.
Sure. I mean, if they had done their job in creating unemployment instead of creating fear in this province, I mean, they've created unemployment by creating fear, and if they'd done their job over the last 2 years, we would have many more jobs.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, John, I was just wondering about this $50 million that you could save by increased productivity. Does that mean that right at the moment you're not producing to capacity?
No, there are 2 programs that we have costed through an introduction of an employee assistance program and a rehabilitation program for injured workers. We could save the government over 2 years about $24 million. We also know that there are many things that are done in government that are extremely costly. Some of it's getting bogged down in paper, some of it's watching the approval of over-expenditures on things like the Coquihalla, that with some monitoring from the union and some involvement from the union, I think that there is another about $25 million that could be readily saved in the course of a collective agreement.
Did Plackett just brush that plan aside?
They haven't addressed it.
That means they haven't responded to it.
Yeah,
You've given them the plan.
We've indicated that we can achieve those savings, but they have refused to actually deal with the proposals we've put on the table.
Go ahead from McLeese Lake.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
I'm a BCGEU member, and I was just wondering, our union now, we hire people that work for us in our offices that are paid $3 to $4 an hour more than our own employees. And I think if, we should clean things up at home in our own union as far as wage scales. As employers ourselves, we're paying our own employees more money. I don't think that's right.
You want to see some economies in the BCGEU administration?
Well, we have one of the highest percentage of union dues in the province, too. I think it's 1.5%.
What do you say to that, John?
Well, what he says is true. We do have well-paid professional people, and I think those people who represent, who get into trouble with a grievance don't want somebody who's second-rate on that
but
job.
when you have secretaries that, they're making $14 or $15 an hour in a union office, and you have the person who's paying their wage that is making $10 and $12 an hour, that's a little steep, I think.
Well, I don't think we ought to set the government as a model of employment standards in this province. They don't represent a good employer to me.
Go ahead from Penticton.
Yes, a comment to your guest. I don't believe that a strike ever occurs unless the employer feels it's in his best interest or their best interest to have a strike. And another is a question to you, and since you represent the media, why is it the media fails so often to differentiate between a strike and a lockout?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's often a slip of the lip, but I think the media does, generally speaking nowadays, know the difference between a strike and a lockout. And I always attempt to get it right, but I don't think it's deliberate. There's nobody who's coming around whispering in our ears saying we've got a lockout, call it a strike.
Yeah.
But no, I wouldn't be worried about that particular aspect of media coverage. I got to tell you. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Good morning, Jack and John. I'd just like to say I'm a government employee worker also, and we as government employees, I think we feel that we're getting a little bit of the shaft here. People feel that we're making all this kind of money. Just to reiterate what that other guy said, I got my T4 too, and it's only $21,000. And talking about the cost of government, we have a bus out at Valley View Hospital, and it just got new seats. Okay, seat covers.
Yeah.
And they put in a bid, for people to come and check it out and measure it and stuff. And you know that those seat covers cost the government $500. So these companies rip off government. So there's a savings that God, you could go out and buy these bloody things for like $40. Ridiculous.
That kind of thing. Mind you, if I can be a little bit critical, I thought your ads on Riverview were, to say the least, a bit deceptive, giving a clear impression there were firm plans to close Riverview and Woodlands when there are not. And that came out of the Union Treasury, did it not?
Jack, let me tell you, I've heard people officially deny those stories, but we have in the Riverview Hospital, there's an interview with one of the people that was brought out from Ontario, and his statement in that paper was he's here to do exactly what he did in Ontario, and that was to close it and put people into group homes. I think we're getting a bit, not quite the whole story from the government about their plans on this.
Yeah, but I don't think you can put a date on anything. There are 21 going to be moved out of Woodlands this year. There are no firm plans at all to close Riverview as long as people need the accommodation.
Jack, we're not opposed to the closing of these institutions. What we're looking for is an orderly transition so that the government retains responsibilities.
But you did cause panic in people's hearts when there is no date.
Yes, I guess we did. That's maybe the way in which they were titled is a mistake, but at least we have somebody's attention now.
Yeah, you certainly have. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I work for the LDB, and I'm what's classified as an auxiliary. I've been there for 2 years. And a gentleman who called earlier was talking about health benefits. Well, auxiliaries do not get any. We don't get any medical. We don't get any dental. We're on call. And if they increase the hours on the regular workers, which in any given store may be anywhere from 2 to 6 permanent staff, the rest of us will be out of a job. So that certainly doesn't create employment.
What she's saying is absolutely true, Jack.
I thought you'd overcome this permanent casual bit.
If people are able to accumulate a year's worth of seniority and then have a projection of a long-term job, they will be converted to regular. But in the liquor stores where this woman works, they don't ever project long enough ahead to give people a permanent job.
Go ahead, please.
You talking to me, Jack?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it seems to me it's kind of ironic. We have these SOCREDs complaining that we have this international reputation about being a disruptive province for labor, and yet they're the ones that seem to be orchestrating these things all the time. They drop them out little piecemeal. First Curtis on For the Record, and then later on Bill Bennett. You know, I'm a little disturbed in the sense that there seems to be a knee-jerk reaction. I could almost predict the newspaper headlines after Bennett and Curtis made those statements, and I'm afraid that if the unions hit the bricks, that the government will just order them back to work and call an election, and they're away to the races. And I think what's lost in all this is that I would like Mr. Bennett and his friends to show me one society where the quality of life and the level of economic activity has increased by eroding the purchasing power of the middle class. It just doesn't make any sense. Who's going to eat in restaurants? Who's going to buy television sets? When you've got people there making $21,000 a year, how are they ever going to raise a family? How are they ever going to buy a home? And I'll leave it at that.
Makes a lot of sense.
Very well said. More with John Shields, BCGEU, after the break. How long do you think, John Shields, BCGEU, that negotiations will be suspended?
Well, I spoke to the government yesterday about trying to get the information from them about the CSP, and hopefully that will be coming shortly. I don't know if they said they were going to announce the changes within days. They probably should do it.
In other words, you're not going back to the table until you know what the CSP amendments are.
I'm not going to walk into the dark and then find out that there's somebody swinging an axe in there.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jack and John. I'm also a BCGEU employee, and I'm actually enjoying the program this morning. It isn't too very often I get a chance, if ever, to get on.
Go on.
I have a letter here written to you, Jack, but I'll skip it. I work at Woodlands. And when I started out there in 1984, from a previous government service that closed down, we had one head dietitian and 2 others. Now we have one head dietitian and 4 others. I also suggested you should drive out there sometime from Monday to Friday. You can't get a parking spot. Visitors' parking is off limits to workers, and then come back over the weekend when management is gone. Woodlands is typical of the old cliché, too many chiefs and not enough Indians. My T4 was 20,158, and my husband has been out of work for 4 years. We raised 4 on that. My ICBC, by the way, didn't go down. None of the ones I worked with did. The basic rate went up, and even though my other rates went down up to 45%, I'm still paying more.
Good. How are things in Woodlands these days?
How they are?
Yeah.
More and more work.
Thank you, ma'am. Wrong one. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm the wife of a government employee. And sure, my husband's making lower wages, but I would still be mighty happy if he just stayed working with no strike. It's the wives that have to pay the budget or balance the budget and pay the mortgage, not the husbands. And as far as this cut in the sick pay, I have a son that works and he never gets any sick pay, and he manages just fine. And my husband never uses up near what they get as it is. So why does he need any more sick pay? I say no strike. I wish the wives could vote on this. I'm sure a lot of us would be saying the very same thing.
Well, the wives are certainly welcome to come to the meetings and express their opinion and hear the discussion. But on the sick pay issue, I remember when I started with government, people, if they got sick, wound up on welfare. We negotiated with the government a wage indemnity plan that cost government workers a lot of money to put it into place. We purchased those days with deferred UI premiums that went back to government. We put $70 million worth of bank sick time at government money disposal in order to achieve those benefits. That's not stuff that the government gave to workers, stuff that workers paid for out of their pockets.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Jack.
Good morning.
My wife works with the BCGEU, and the union's always feeding her stuff like doom and gloom stuff's going to happen to them, and they've been doing that kind of stuff to her for years. I think that's pitiful. Anybody who'd listen to your guest has got holes in their head.
John?
Well, we've tried to be factual in the information, and I think anything that we've put out to members since I've been president is straight factual information.
Go ahead from Prince George.
Yes, I'm a correctional officer at Prince George Regional Correctional Center. And people seem to think we get everything handed to us right off the bat, and we don't. I'm an auxiliary. I've been up here for 9 months now. I won't get any benefits until I hit 1827 hours. Now it means I got to work anywhere from a year to 15 months before I get anything. If I get sick, I don't get paid for it. I can't even get a loan because they won't even guarantee my wages. I can miss a month's worth of work, or I can work, doesn't matter how many hours, right off the bat. So maybe people should just sit down and think. I had a joke with a couple inmates. They thought I was getting danger pay. Found out I was making less than they did when they're on the street. They asked me what the heck I was doing up there for. It makes you kind of wonder. And people say, sure, other provinces are taking cutbacks. Alberta right now makes $8,000 a year more than I do, and they took a cutback. Still make that much more.
In the same job. Thanks for your call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. I would like to comment on postal inefficiency. My 4-year-old daughter mailed her first letter on...
No. Yes, carry on.
And it was a Valentine's card to me, and it still hasn't arrived. And how do you explain to her that we have this wonderful system, and you never know when things are ever going to arrive in the mail? We have relatives in Europe, and it takes 1 week to get a letter from them, and it takes a month for me to mail a letter back to them over in Europe.
Thanks very much, but it's not about the BCGEU. Go ahead from Fort St. John.
Yes, Mr. Webster.
Yes.
I have a problem with the BCGEU. My wife works with them, and when she goes to a meeting, you can't associate the difference between a BCGEU meeting and an NDP pep rally. You know, they would gain a lot of respect if they would get themselves away from the NDP. The middle-of-the-road guy would understand them and sympathize with them.
Well, I think, caller, what our position as a union is that we are not partisan and we are not affiliated to any party. If government workers have decided that they are going to support a party and they talk about that at a meeting, that's not a union policy.
But you are by and large supporters of the NDP.
Well, I think we are not partisan, Jack. We are not actively involved in the party.
Forgot. Were you turned down by the executive of the BC Federation of Labour for active support in your current campaign?
No, not at all.
Have you asked them for any special support?
We've been keeping closely in touch, but there is. We will get the support if needed from the Fed.
So next step, therefore, is the announcement, you hope soon, of the CSP package changes.
Yes.
And then back to the bargaining table.
Well, hopefully we'll get this province tour through this week, make a decision on whether or not we should be asking the members for a mandate vote. Hopefully back to negotiations quickly.
One more call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. Hello?
Yes, make it brief.
Yes, Jack, just in my opinion, I think that it would be a great deal of benefit to this province if we privatized many of the sectors that are now controlled by the BCGEU, the liquor stores.
Privatize a lot, you say, cut down the civil service, reduce the problem, and save money. John,
almost everything they've privatized have cost the taxpayers more money.
My thanks to John Shields, President, BCGEU. We'll watch for the government announcement on CSP, and then they might keep you hanging around till when? God knows when.
Well, there's no reason to keep us waiting.
They can give you the decision now.
We can agree.
I'll be back after the break. A stockbroker.
Says Expo 86, 73 days to go. Can you do that when Fred cues you?
I have to say, Expo
86, 73 days to go.
Expo.
No, with the car's not coming, so...
But is the cart going to be there?
No, it won't be. No,
when do you want me to say it?
Fred will cue you.
I'll cue you.
After I close.
And then, yeah.
Expo 86, 73 days. Don't get it wrong, Jack.
They got the cart.
No, they haven't got the card. No, they haven't got the card, Jack. You're going to say it when we come to it. It's just your voice, that's all.
Expo 86, 70. I'll do it that way.
Okay.
Expo 86, 73 days to go. How about that? You like that?
You got 17 seconds.
Tomorrow we've got my friends from the Income Tax Department and an expert on RRSPs, Nicole Fauché from Woodgundy. And I'll be back, and what else? On the Mayor of Trail, tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely. Expo 86, 73 days to go.